Okay, we're here. Hello. Welcome for anybody who's listening, and welcome, Courtney. For anyone who doesn't know, I'm Stephanie Colesrud. I'm a registered dietitian. I'm a neurodivergent nutrition expert who helps people with under and overeating, intuitive eating, relationships with food, binge eating, anything related to the neurodivergent eating experience. And I'm here today with Courtney, and we're going to talk a little bit about her therapy practice. So I'm just going to let you introduce yourself and then we'll get into it.
Yes, thank you. As you were talking, I was like, she's really good at it.
Thank
But
you.
yes,
Thank you. We'll get into that later. We'll get
yeah,
into that
yeah,
later.
for sure. But yes, I am Courtney Kramer, and my therapy practice is called Renaissance Healing. And I am an IFS and somatic therapist. I'm kind of new into my training with somatic experiencing and just like loving that. And so I typically work with folks who are neurodivergent with some serious like ADHD, and then kind of who align with some avoidant tendencies. Maybe they intellectualize, they sort of like leave their body to handle life. I know, like, I
Yeah.
am all my clients are me.
Right. No, same.
So yeah, and then I kind of help those people sort of discover who they are because a lot of times they end up doing people pleasing as well,
Right.
and kind of prioritize everybody else and their needs and forget who they are and what their body is craving. So yeah, a lot of the work I do is just helping them kind of return home to themselves and be like, oh, I can be in my own body and be in
Mhm.
relationships and be in life and it can feel good.
Period. I think people pleasing is like such a common experience for women, but also for neurodivergent folks specifically. I think like masking and people pleasing kind of go hand in hand. So definitely related to all of those things you shared. The reason that I invited Courtney on today was because I knew that she was practicing in this kind of somatics space, and I know very little about it, but I have been increasingly intrigued by the topic specifically as an approach for neurodivergent folks. So I'd love to start with kind of defining that what does somatics even mean? Because I think that if you were to like ask me, I would get the answer wrong. So let's just start with that. Like when you say you're a somatic there, like what does that even explain?
Yes, love that. I mean, really the word is like thrown around everywhere, especially
Right.
on social media. And truly,
Totally.
the word somatic, I think, research fact check me, that is just the Greek word for body.
Mm,
Uh, so somatics itself is just like body. So
right.
you see like somatic breath work is just like body based breath work. Somatic yoga, it's just
Right.
yoga that's kind of tends a little bit more to the body. So what I am doing, I'm going through the training of somatic experiencing. And so somatic experiencing is a therapy intervention modality um, made by Peter or developed by Peter Levine. So it's an approach that basically gets you into the body instead of the head to
Right.
find tension or stored energy or stored trauma in the nervous system, and then helps you sort of. There's so many different kind of layers to it, but
Yeah.
the ultimate goal is to sort of help you complete those threat responses that get stuck in the body. So basically, if you like you were in a dangerous situation and you really
Right.
body had like the urge to fight off this thing but couldn't, there might be some stuck, like anger in your
Right.
body. Somatic experiencing really helps us find that stuck energy and like helps it sort of get completed that response.
That makes so much sense to me. I feel like and I am coming from a place of like being a hyperactive ADHDer. I'm definitely pretty much like a clean cut hyperactive. Don't have a lot of inattentiveness on my end, but I feel like I'm extremely mentally hyperactive, and that causes me often to like not be in my body at all. So the stored energy like resonate like when I hear that verbiage, I'm like, okay. So my question, I guess, is like the stored energy that you're referring to. It obviously definitely relates to traumatic experiences, but would you say it also is not necessarily always linked to a traumatic experience?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So trauma is not necessarily like a thing that has happened. It
Right.
is like the response that's left in our body. And our bodies have this, really cool but like a little outdated nervous system that basically just responds to anything that it deems a threat.
Right.
Like for someone with ADHD, that could be a homework assignment, that could be recording a podcast, right? That could
Right.
be anything, like any chore item. And your
Yeah.
nervous system is going to be like, ooh, this is because it's really outdated and it's not so clued in. It might
Right.
see something and deem it even more scary than it really is. And so
Right.
that hyperactivity in the head can definitely be a little bit of that like flight,
Yeah.
energy, like, "Ooh, let's get out of here by thinking about all the possibilities of thinking
Right.
instead." And
Right.
it's not necessarily connected to like trauma that we
Right.
may name or whatever, but it is kind of connected to like a threat response.
Yeah.
Uh,
Totally. Okay. That makes perfect sense to me. Before I was diagnosed, and I didn't know what was going on, I experienced like periods of time where I, like, when I didn't have the language, explained them to my therapist as like almost being disassociated or blacked out and kind of like coming to. And I realized that that had a lot to do with a disconnect between like literally my physical body. I actually did, I have a perfect example of this, and this is like literally happened a few days ago. I was getting ready for bed, and me and my boyfriend share a bathroom, and it's very small. So I was like, he brushed his teeth, I brushed my teeth. I said, "Oh, I'm gonna pee, and then you can go." And he was like, "Okay." So I went in the bathroom, did my thing, went to the bedroom, and I was like, "I don't think I peed." Like I literally was like, wait. And he was like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I have to pee." He's like, "You just did." I'm like, "I didn't." Like I literally sat on the toilet, went somewhere, and then like got up and I was like, there's something sick about the fact that I just disconnected so heavily from my body that I like went through the motions of using the restroom and like didn't actually do it. So it's clearly something I'm still experiencing, but I definitely feel like um pre-diagnosis, before I knew how to cope a little bit more, I definitely was just like so not in my body. Curious what your insight is, experience is with like what type of people do you find are in need or could benefit from somatic therapy? What are some of the tell signs that you're like, yeah, you have some like disconnect between the physical? Like, what are you kind of like, if someone's listening to this, how would you kind of, how would they know whether somatic approach would be something that is aligned for them?
yeah. Short answer, they're a human on this
Right.
planet right now.
Period.
But longer answer. Also, yeah, I love that example. That's
That's so bad.
real, so real. My ADHD brain, there's so many
Mm,
paths I could go down
I
with.
know. I feel that so bad. So a lot of times when I'm like coaching clients, I'll be like, okay, so I'm going to tell you two things and then hold on because I'm going to write them down first and then we're going to talk about them because if I don't, then we're fucked.
Literally,
So feel
literally,
that
I'm like in my
heavily.
head, like, okay, we're gonna put this like, yeah, ADHD people love to chase dopamine. And
Right.
so much that we leave our bodies to find it. Um,
Right. Okay, period.
yeah, the nervous system. So, I mean, so some signs that somatic could work for you is that a lot of times if you feel like therapy just doesn't work anymore because
Right.
you are so self-aware, you're like, I know that yeah, like am so out of disconnected and I know that I do all those things, but like what's knowing doing about it?
Right.
Welcome to the world of getting into the body.
Yeah.
A little, so the disconnect. So if we're finding that we're dissociating, we're not really remembering a lot of things that go on in our lives. Days go by and we're like, oh my gosh, I don't even remember what I ate yesterday for
Yes.
lunch. Or just sort of like I haven't cried in a while, like thing where you're just sort of like I haven't felt much of anything for a really long time.
Like a
That,
numbness almost or indifference.
yep,
Yeah.
apathy, just sort of. I mean, and if we're using like clinical words, depression,
Yeah.
but really it's just yeah, like disconnect, it's dissociation, like a little bit of that freeze, or the
Totally.
opposite, like if you're just almost so so on the go and you're really having a hard time sleeping because you're just constantly moving and constantly going. You have no white space in the calendar. You're getting a little bit snippy at people
Mm,
and really like easily irritated. That's like kind of that fight or flight energy. And so both of
right.
them are really just, which is like ADHD in a nutshell. It's
Yeah, and
like,
like you're just describing ADHD symptoms. Like I'm like, this is like all my clients and followers, I feel. Yeah, check, 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 check.
That's me too. Yeah, I mean, it's really dysregulation.
Yeah,
And I think ADHDers, like, it's unfortunately a huge part of the diagnosis is
it's
just
like
like a
baseline.
literally
Yeah,
emotional dysregulation. These like high highs and these low lows, like it can get really difficult. And so, yeah, somatic therapy can one, it's just really empowering. I find that a lot of my clients and myself that have ADHD or just anywhere on the neurodivergent spectrum,
yeah,
it's so empowering to be able to have a little bit more. And it's not necessarily like somatic therapy doesn't do this like symptom management. It empowers you to have a little bit more of that control. And again, not the control and like forcing yourself
right.
to be calm or like forcing yourself to not. It's more like, oh, I can choose to go into this really good feeling of dissociation if that like is necessary. I
Yeah,
can choose to like fill my calendar up. But the whole point is that like you have a choice to say, oh, or I can just kind of like be calm and be a little bit more present in my body right now. So
totally.
yeah, where I feel like ADHD, it's like we don't have a choice. We're so impulsive, we're so hyperactive, or we just like are procrastinating everything. Like those Achilles heel areas, somatic
Yeah,
therapy, like, oh, you want the secret ingredient? It's this. It's like tracking. It's getting you like to begin to feel discomfort if you've never felt anything in your body ever, or beginning at feeling joy if you've never
right.
felt anything ever.
Totally.
So yeah, I hope that answers the question of
Oh, it
like,
totally does. It totally does. I feel like another conversation too for neurodivergent folks specifically, and like because now my wheels are just turning in terms of like just physical sensations in our bodies in general. There's obviously the concept of like interoceptive differences. And for anyone who's listening who doesn't know what I mean by that, I mean the neurodivergent tendency to not feel connected to our bodies or not sense things on the same like level. This can go for any bodily cues, hunger, fullness, fatigue, thirst, the need to use the restroom, like a lot of these bodily cues that can come very naturally for neurotypical people can often be missed, neglected, ignored. I don't like that word as much because that sounds like it's intentional, but can be missed by neurodivergent folks. So I'm curious too if there's just like more of a need for facilitated somatic somatics in like the neurodivergent population because we're just simply like not doing it on our own. Like we're so I feel like it's harder for us to read our cues in general. So I could see the benefit of someone like giving us tools for connecting with our bodies.
100%, it becomes a skill we have to practice.
Yeah,
We were
100%.
never taught or never accommodated for. And yeah, somatic, there's like these two cool things within somatic experiencing. One is called orientation, and the other one is called tracking. And tracking is simply tracking either what your behavior is doing, what you're thinking, what sensations you're feeling, maybe any images that are coming into your mind, your own affect. And if that is really hard to do sort of on ourselves,
Yeah.
we kind of practice tracking on other people. Um,
Mm.
and I think that that is a over like we already do that. We're hyper
Yeah.
vigilant as fuck. Like we
Yeah, literally,
track
that's what I was
everything.
thinking. I'm
We
like, we're reading.
constantly reading. And so if
Yeah,
you already have that skill, right? And so what it kind of does is it's just teaching you, hey, what if you took that sort of hypervigilance and you just turned it a little bit towards yourself? And again, which I know we'll talk about a little bit of ELY, but like the compassionate problem solving. So there's like this compassionate curiosity. So we're not
right.
tracking ourselves through the lens of criticism, like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm hyperfixating on this thing. It's literally like, oh yeah, I'm like really hyperfixated on
Like
this.
currently, right now, I'm hyper fit. I feel like that there's so much power in that in the like neurodivergent experience, and this is something we talk a lot about in Ellie, which is my program for anyone who's curious. But there's so much power that comes from just like an acknowledgement of like what's happening in the present, even if there's zero action to like change what's going on. And that goes specifically for like binging, overeating, emotional eating. Like I think a lot of times people come to me and they're like, "Oh my God, I'm doing this thing every night. I'm emotionally overeating and I feel like shit about it." Da, da, da. And then when we get to the part of Ellie where we're talking about their emotional eating and binge eating at night, when I start asking questions about like what is happening in that present moment, they're like, "Wait, no, I don't think I'm very there." And when we start to be there, like they start to recognize, oh, I'm doing it. Like right now, I'm doing it. Wait a second. Even just that can give us a lot of insight into what's contributing and what are identifying what your actual needs are and like experimenting with strategies.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I definitely relate. That
Yeah.
resonates.
You're already kind of like teaching this like somatic work, right?
I,
Because
yeah,
you are.
totally. Yeah. Well, and same with the concept of like hunger cues, right?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of times, again, like intersective differences are such a struggle for a lot of neurodivergent folks. So when they come into Ellie, my program, and they're like confused about how to read them, first we obviously make sure that their eating patterns are supportive of present cues, and then we start to figure out how to identify their experience of a hunger cue, which is often different than a neurotypical person's. A lot of times they're not getting the stomach growling, they're just getting brain fog, irritability, fatigue, or they're just binging at night. And maybe the binging at night is literally the only indication that they're under eating or whatever. But like, I find that when we start to work on that, recognizing your hunger cues, identifying what your hunger cues, how you experience hunger, it translates into other aspects of their life. Like I get a lot of feedback that's like, oh, not only am I now recognizing that I'm hungry, I'm also now recognizing like when I'm irritable, when I'm overwhelmed, when I'm X, Y, and Z. And it allows them to take a little bit more immediate action instead of kind of being out of their bodies in the moment and then like hours later being like, why do I feel like shit?
Yeah, that
Yeah.
like that. So it's really cool because what you're naming is basically it's somatic experiencing. Obviously, there's a lot more nuance in a somatic
Sure.
experiencing session, but in the it's a great example of sort of tracking their own experience in that moment, and then even using like orienting. So orienting is like, okay, even if it's too much to be in my body, I can at least orient to my couch that I'm sitting on and the bag of chips that's right next to me and the dog over there and the tea. Like I can at least kind of come back into this space, even if
Right.
this space is too much,
Yeah.
and begin there. And then slowly be like, okay, if I'm noticing I'm in my space and I'm feeling kind of safe, maybe now I can kind of like check in with my body and see what's going on. And so it's this like really slow pacing. But then, yeah, like you're also saying, is once we sort of know what's going on in our body, a lot of times it's really cool because say you are feeling irritated or you're feeling angry and you don't even realize that your fists are like clenching. So
Right.
part of like we might have an urge to just be like, oh, I just want to like punch something. Right. And so we might just like slowly allow our arms to like
Do it.
do it. You just want to like that's the whole the completion of that urge, right? So it's like, yeah, if we're hungry, our body is saying, oh, I have this really big urge to go and like grab this banana over here. And we like allow ourselves to complete that urge. We build that trust with our body again and that
Right.
capacity and that safety. So somatic experiencing is kind of just, yeah, orienting to yourself, like noticing what's going on, finding some safety and some comfort. If
Yeah.
too much, if it's too right? And then like noticing the urges in our body and then allowing ourselves to like
Acting on
safely
them.
act on the urge, right? And that I know we like there's like talk about like somatic release.
Yes,
And
that's exactly where my brain is about to go because I think that's a very big buzzword. It's actually something I use with my clients at this point. Like, and I'm never like giving. I just had a group call like 2 days ago, and I literally said, so I'm at the edge of my scope right here. Okay, so this is my scope, and me talking about somatics is right outside of it. Okay, we're not in my scope anymore. YouTube it, Google it, look into it. It's relevant for this scenario, but I can't be prescriptive about it. But I found that exploring this concept of somatic release is beneficial to a lot of clients in like the unmasking conversations, in the under and over stimulation conversations. So tell me a little bit about like your opinion about the the buzzword of somatic release, maybe give us more info on like what is like that slow punch a somatic like would you consider that example a somatic
So, okay,
release?
this is a good topic, and I'm just gonna like caveat that I'm
Yeah,
like in beginning two of like beginning one, two, three, and then there's like intermediate one, two. So I'm like very new in the
sure.
somatic experiencing training. But what I'm learning is the more, I guess, accurate word would be completion.
Mm,
Like a somatic completion. It's almost think about like a wave. Waves don't really like release onto the beach; they complete themselves onto the beach, right?
totally.
Um, and so that punch is I'm completing this like fight response that's stuck in my body.
Right.
And by completing that response, I now have capacity to sort of like move on. Um, I think sometimes with releasing, we can actually, what I've seen online,
Yeah,
not from everybody, but like some small things with releasing is can actually like further traumatize sometimes.
or like almost activate you where like more.
Yes.
Yeah,
So it's like they're kind of missing the idea of like some safety and grounding and resourcing that happens beforehand.
right.
Um, because we don't want to just go straight into like, okay, so you're feeling like shit. Let's feel that even more, even
Yeah,
more. Let's feel that
yeah.
even. It's like, wait, I don't want to feel like shit. That's why I've been
Right,
dissociating my whole life.
right.
Uh, so some of that release has to be. There's another fancy word called titration, which is simply like we want to feel a little bit and like kind of expand our capacity for that, and then maybe we can go a little bit more
Hmm.
then we can maybe go a little bit more, but that takes a lot of time. And so it's almost like, okay, I could be sitting on the couch, and binge eating, and I want to kind of come back into the present moment. And so again, yeah, to titrate that experience so it doesn't have this huge catharsis of like
Right.
crying and like shaking. I might
Yeah.
just first notice like my foot. My foot isn't doing anything. It's a pretty neutral spot. So I'm going to notice a neutral or a positive thing first, and then I might start to notice my hand in the bag of chips and how
Right.
uncomfortable that really feels.
Yeah.
And if I start to feel like that's almost like too much, I might go back into like noticing the room again.
Right. And just not pushing in that regard.
Not pushing, not forcing. Because if you think about neurodivergency too, we've been like forced to withstand so much discomfort for like
Right.
years, hence why
Right.
we associated mass. So
Right.
it's almost like this opposite experience for us, which is kind of uncomfortable, is first experiencing like comfort, pleasure, and joy, and like having that, or like even calmness. It's almost like, or boredom. Oh my God, right? Like those things feel so like they're like torment for us.
Right.
So it's almost like, how can we first start there and get
Yeah.
comfort, feeling comfortable before we like continue to like stay in this like kind of extreme place of discomfort. So the releasing is I would encourage like a little bit more of the word complete. Like if you have this urge, complete it, complete that
Right.
urge. And so that way you can kind of move towards the next thing that's like kind of at the forefront, or just notice like what happens after you complete that urge. You feel a little bit more open and a little bit
Right.
more clear, a little bit
Right.
more, present.
I feel like when I hear or see the verbiage somatic release or like release, a lot of times it is punching
Yeah.
or like screaming into a pillow or something.
Yeah.
Or like pushing against a wall
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
those are like the ones that I hear or see the most. What circumstances are like I understand the punch example now, but like what circumstances would you go for completion? Like how do you know? That sounds so funny.
I know.
Now that I said it out loud. But like no, but like when can I scream? Like when? Because for me personally, and this is totally like different for everyone. Like I also, uh, in being very mentally hyperactive, I often am understimulated physically. Like I could probably sit on the couch all day and like if I had the right medium, like just have things flowing out of my brain for like 10 hours straight and like not move one time. And I find that that level of like maybe mental overstimulation, but physical understimulation is often where why a lot of my clients find themselves in this like binge eating, dopamine seeking, like stimulation craving in the evenings. So like where am I going with this? I don't know. I think I'm just
I'm
thinking like I do you know what I'm trying to say? Like I'm just curious kind of like one, I guess when is it like when is it appropriate to kind of like get out pent up energy, and is this not a somatic therapy conversation, or like what are your thoughts on that concept of like I'm understimulated physically, it's causing me to do other sensory seeking behaviors that aren't as like that are harmful for me, that's like cheek and tongue biting, skin
yeah.
picking, like hair pulling, that type of thing.
Yeah, great question. So, two thoughts are coming to mind. When I think about when is it appropriate to sort of have that bigger kind of completion of that experience or that release, is how much of your compassionate observer is online.
Mm.
And so, what I mean by that is there enough of you that has the capacity that after you do this, that like you can kind of return back to a regulated state? Are you kind of observing this experience, or are you fully embodying this experience? And if you're
Mm.
fully embodying this experience, it might be too much for your nervous
Okay,
system.
that makes sense. That total like, am I throwing a tantrum as an impulse, or am
Right,
I? And I mean tantrum as like a totally neutral descriptor, as someone who like craves tantrums. Am
right.
I throwing a tantrum as this like impulse, or am I feeling and observing these
These,
urges and wanting to follow
it's
through
the
on them?
it's the intention, right? Like I'm
Yeah,
intentionally noticing this like a heightened experience in my body. I'm like, okay, I can be with this experience, and I'm really noticing the urge to just like scream into a pillow right now. Like I
yeah,
can feel it in my throat, and I really want to do this. Versus like I'm not really I'm not in my body anymore. I'm just screaming
right.
hello, and then all of a sudden afterwards, I still feel like shit because I maybe went a little bit too far. So
Or
that
you almost like have shame about it because you're like, it
yes,
wasn't something that felt like intentionally therapeutic. It felt like a tantrum. It felt like an impulse.
right, yeah. So
Yeah.
it's turning that kind of that just enough distance, right? And so that's where I think with this over understimulation, if you're understimulated and you like want your body to start moving, start with like slow, like wiggling your fingers and noticing that, wiggling your
Yeah.
noticing that. If even if you're biting your cheek, right, take a moment to notice that, and then just even like take a moment to like stop the urge and notice what
Yeah.
it's like to like hold back that urge,
Yeah.
right, and just kind of playing around with like, okay, maybe I just start with like moving my shoulders, or how does that feel, right, or
Right. Instead of maybe just going straight to
yeah,
what you maybe actually are craving or thinking about, but like not just going straight there and like having this like a explosive release of energy that
yeah,
maybe isn't releasing energy, but it's actually you just like activating more of it.
yes,
Okay.
100%. It's
Okay.
like turning like it's
And
like
I'm like, what's a good metaphor?
yeah, like I don't know. It's almost, I mean, it's going from like literally being in like a quiet room to going to the mall, like pretty immediately. And
Yeah.
like that really intense change in environment, and can be like, it's like, whoa, all of a sudden I feel like I'm gonna, yeah, like pass out. Versus like, yeah, let's kind of start in like that small room, and then maybe come out into the
Right.
hallway, and then maybe just go downstairs, and then,
I could also see just from like a brain body connection standpoint, like if you aren't doing that gradually and you're going from like a still, let's just say I'm sitting there feeling understimulated and I go from that to like 0 to 100 in terms of like a somatic release, like your brain is like, what, like how did we get here? And then it's having like more of a reaction to it versus like if you are doing it gradual and being like an observer and feeling present in it, then like your brain and body are more likely to like be on the same page and it to be more of a release versus like
right,
disorienting.
right, absolutely. And
Okay.
in the opposite, right? When we are maybe having a little bit more of that like hyperactive moment,
Yeah.
right? And or you're feeling like that sense of justice, and you're just so angry, and you're like ranting, and you hear that like, okay, just like calm down. Right. That's like that opposite of like 0 to 100. It's like you're telling someone who's at 100 to just like instantly go to zero.
Yeah, and I am as like a person who is like a certified yapper, I got told all the time to be less, be quiet, like lower my voice. I can tell you like when I'm like in a like worked up and being loud and being myself and then someone is telling me to like calm down, usually that like causes a little bit of a okay, fine, I'll just like shut down, but the energy is still there. Like it's not so I'm outwardly presenting like I'm like calmer and quiet now, but like in my chest, I'm like I want to scream now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You're basically your body's urge is to move. And if we go with like the societal standards of like, oh, you're like it's inside
Right.
voice, right?
Right.
You're stopping that urge to move your body. So yeah, it's that same thing of
Two drawing, 0 to 100.
yeah, like we got to find that middle ground to be like, hey, okay, as you're talking, why don't we just like start moving at the same time? Or
Yeah.
like, as you're talking, let's just like also kind of notice the room around you. So it's not, you're not like so in the speed of this moment. Or like, how about, yeah, just like give some of that like energy to another part of your body for just a second, or even just notice if there's any part of your body that's still and see if you can kind of like hold space in both spaces.
Faces.
So it's like moving, you have to meet a nervous system where it's at
Yeah,
and like slowly find that space of like right.
totally. Okay, so I feel like a big takeaway here is for anyone who's interested in somatics, obviously seek a somatic practitioner, but like outside of that, if you're interested in this concept of like, or you are someone who's under or overstimulated or feels like you have pent up energy or whatever, it needs to be approached gradually and with a level of compassion and a like observation and making sure that you're doing what you can to like keep your brain and body in the same place or get them to meet each other. Maybe is a better word.
Nailed it.
Period. I'm a good student.
Yeah. A plus.
Thank you. They say that good teachers are good students. No, but okay. I feel like that was so helpful and makes me understand things a lot better, and it is going to help me kind of relay this information to my clients in a better way. Because I do think that somatic therapy practices are have the potential to be very beneficial to neurodivergent folks in general, but also like definitely the client population that I serve, where there's this level of like understimulation, dopamine seeking, and like craving for a somatic experience in the evenings after masking all day. So that this was also helpful, and I feel like I have a very good understanding. Is there anything else that we didn't mention about like somatics and specifically neurodivergent populations and like how it can be beneficial or anything else you went into this conversation before we kind of pivot a little bit?
Yes. So you kind of mentioned that like unmasking.
Yes,
What I've
please.
noticed, yeah, what I've noticed with the somatic experiencing is that my clients who have really like just loved it and engaged with it have more capacity to unmask. Because it's really hard. I mean, in this world, it's really hard to unmask and like be somebody who is like going against whatever is
Right.
normal.
Challenging a
Yeah.
expectation or a norm.
Yes.
Yeah.
So somatic experiencing, I think if you do it with a practitioner, you again, you sort of are able to feel the things that you weren't able to feel in the past. And if you kind of think about like your body as if there's like a line of versions of you or a line of like feelings,
Yeah.
we've just like held a door against that for so long. Somatic experiencing can kind of like open the door one at a time.
Mm,
And the more you do it and the more you like kind of like let these people in and let these feelings in, all of a sudden you're going to realize there's not really a door there or there's not
yeah.
really in there anymore. And now you can kind of pivot towards like, oh, well, what's to come? Like I can,
Mm,
now that I
hmm.
have this skill of really like allowing myself to experience my body and my feelings,
Yeah.
I can take on more. And so you build your confidence to just like show up and manage some social anxiety situations,
Right.
um, like taking on new like things that you just like never thought you could do before, like job positions or relationship experience.
Yeah.
You
Totally.
like you just have more space in your body to like navigate future or current stressors.
Uncharted territory, maybe also.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Going outside of your comfort zone, you're like, okay, hey, this has actually expanded now
Yeah.
that I've kind of released some of the cue
Totally.
in my body. So that's like I think just to
Well,
offer.
and masking is inherently about safety. That's the
Yeah.
whole thing. And we've been throwing around the term masking and unmasking. And if anyone's like, what the fuck are these people talking about? We're talking about basically the concept of neurodivergent folks having to put on a quote unquote mask to kind of quote unquote fit in. But it's not to fit in not necessarily just from a place of societal like expectations as much as it is to escape or evade marginalization, to escape or evade potentially traumatic experiences. So it is really a matter of safety for most folks. Like it's not just like yes, there's concept of like, oh, I don't want to be seen as weird or quirky or whatever, but that's more of a playful example. Masking like fundamentally and as a concept like by and large, masking is about neurodivergent folks seeking safety. So it makes perfect sense to me that you're like, hey, you can actually like unmask a little bit. You have to mask a little bit less if you figure out ways to like
Feel safe in your body.
right
Like, yeah.
to harbor safety of your own. So yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. And it's like, and last thing I'll say, it's like, it's cool
Please.
because, like you're saying, like sometimes we have to mask. Like,
Right.
there's just certain environments where it's just like your
Yeah.
safety is at risk.
Yeah.
With somatic experiencing, it's just like one, you can kind of have more of like a conscious awareness of that need. And then you also have this outlet to go back when you leave that environment to say, okay, I don't have to let this experience stay with me. I can really work through what I couldn't in that moment because it
Yep.
was,
Yeah.
um,
And you have an awareness of that that you otherwise wouldn't have.
yes,
Yeah, totally.
yeah.
Amazing. Oh, this is so informative. I feel like people will have a lot to say about this. We'll probably
Uh,
be searching, Googling somatic therapists in their area. I'll make sure we'll give you a full, we'll give your contact info at the end. But I did want to pivot, if you're cool with that,
let's do it.
because we haven't really mentioned this yet, but you guys, Courtney was actually in Ellie, my program. Eat Like You is the full name for it. So it's my intuitive eating program, focuses on under and overeating, and I thought we could talk a little bit about Courtney's experience. Courtney's also not the only therapist that I've had in Ellie. I think me and therapists really lock in, and a lot of times I feel like we kind of like help each other in a lot of ways in terms of like therapists have a lot of insight in the therapy realm of things, but food is something that is often not otherwise mentioned. So I felt like Courtney had an amazing experience at Ellie, and I thought we could talk a little bit about that as well. Also to kind of normalize, destigmatize the concept of like struggling with food in general, like, and also being a neurodivergent professional, I am constantly like, this is something that I've been trying to dedicate this year to. It's why I created my YouTube and why I created my podcast is like, yes, I'm a nutrition professional. Yes, I have my relationship with food figured out. But I'm not an authority figure. Like I'm not, and when it comes to like helping neurodivergent people, there can be a hierarchy, right? Like it's very common to be like looking up at your therapist or looking up at your dietitian and thinking that they're somebody who knows infinitely more than you, and maybe they know a lot more than you about a specific topic, but like neurodivergence is about the sharing of lived experiences, and I think I have just as much to learn as I have to teach. So anyways, that was a ramble, but I thought it'd be help like beneficial to kind of destigmatize the concept that like, yeah, you're a therapist and yeah, you have a lot figured out, but you also struggled with food and got to dive into that with Ellie. So I'd love to hear a little bit about like where you were kind of at with food when you started, what made you kind of decide to get into Ellie, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. Love that destigmatization because, like, I'm a human.
Right,
Like,
literally. Like, what do you want me to do?
literally. And like the whole reason I'm a therapist is because I had like so many problems that
Yeah,
I,
because you needed therapy.
yeah. So yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, I think that I also want to practice what I preach, which is like one, holistic care. Like
Right.
therapy isn't gonna save your life. Like it's one pillar in
Cool.
existence. Yeah. Um, and two, like you're starting your program. So sort of where I was at was like a huge life transition, moving from Virginia to Arizona.
Yes.
And I knew that I only had so many spoons to like handle my
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
I typically like food is like the first thing that kind of drops. Like I just
Right.
start either I just don't eat or I like just like binge
Right.
because I just like everything that you were saying in the beginning, right? Where you just forget to eat all day and then you like are starving and you're
And
like,
then
oh
you're
shit,
like,
you just eat whatever is
right,
most convenient.
right.
Um, and I knew that that was going to happen because I had to worry about so many other things. So I think in the beginning, one, right? Like I'll name this for anybody else who might be feeling this. Like there was some resistance because I have that tendency to avoid anything that's going to put me in my body. And there was enough of my like observer on that was like, girl, you're really gonna need this.
Yeah.
Like lock in.
Yeah.
Which, like
Also, I feel like relationships with food are like so deeply personal and private.
yeah,
Obviously, if you're in therapy, everything you're talking about in therapy is like probably deeply personal and private. But food is something that people harbor so much shame about and is so under talked about. Like it's almost like you can talk to your friends sometimes, be like, I've been having anxiety lately, but being like, I'm binging isn't something that a lot of people like tell other people or really even like fully accept in themselves. So I find that that's a big part of it too, is like a lot of times when people come to me, it's like they're just finally like, I need someone else to fucking know about this. Like I'm tired of this being this thing I'm carrying around and like no one really knowing about it. And yeah, like being able to identify that like that life transition, you're like, yeah, I know this is going to exacerbate what is underlying and I need to recruit some support for it.
right. Because like I think when my friends can help and my family can help,
Right.
and you know, you need to lock in a professional every once in a while who
Literally.
give you those tools and that guidance and that accountability in a way that you don't want to put that full set of expectations onto these people who
Right.
have their own shit going on. And
Literally.
so yeah, I think that that was, and I think to tie off like somatic and this experience and what I needed at the time was like just gradual education and gradual acknowledgement. And that's what I
Yeah.
loved about the program, was that it was so gradual,
Yeah.
where I didn't feel like I was kind of rushing into all this content at once. Like I could kind of take my time with
Right.
understanding a specific space or like a specific thing about myself.
Hmm.
Um, and again, like I mentioned earlier, that compassionate, piece of it that you highlight so much, where it's like,
Yes.
we're not coming in here and criticizing what's going on, like
Right.
where you're at in life and this is what you're doing, right?
Right.
Like, if anything, have some neutrality to it, because you're just a human being
And
who's
like the shame does nothing. The shame's how we got here. Like usually the shame is how it grew into such an issue that it's having such an effect on your life, is because there was so much shame harbored about it that you weren't able to like take a more objective and compassionate approach to these issues, or step back enough to like really identify what's exacerbating them because you're just too busy beating yourself up about them existing in the first place.
right, which
Yeah.
like again, yeah, is not gonna get me to feel more energized or more regulated. And
Or give you any spoons, that's for sure.
it's taking them, right? It's like an
Literally.
actual effort to like scream at yourself all day. Like that's so much work.
I know whenever people are like, I wish I had a spoon or two, I'm like, any chance there's like like the shame is taking any spoon? Is there guilt potentially stealing a spoon or two at
Is
any
there anybody like
point?
really mean in there who like just wants to yell at you all day? Yeah, right.
Right.
That one right back.
Right. Literally.
Yeah, so I think that again, that gradual approach, the compassionate approach, and I mean so much, and then a little bit of the like mind, like it was the education, right? Those videos were really supportive, but
Yeah.
then it's like kind of homework, application, and practice, sort of getting my hands dirty.
Right, right. I also think this is a total neurodivergent experience, especially like if you have the flavor of neurodivergence that is a learner or like an explanation seeker. A lot of times we'll do research about these topics a lot beforehand, and then we'll have almost like too much information about them, and like none of it translates into actual implementation. So I think like the gradual approach of Ellie, but also the combination of like, okay, you watch this short
Yeah.
video, and then you immediately have to take what you just got from that video and put it into a game plan that actually applies to you and makes sense for you, and like facilitating that compassionate problem solving on the spot instead of being like, okay, here's this information, like do with it what you want because we know what will happen if that is the case.
Right. Like,
Yeah. Literally nothing. Like exactly. You're just gonna go, oh, that's good to know. I'm gonna work on that, and then we don't. So yeah, kind of forcing you to take what you've learned and apply it specifically to yourself, and then turn around and get on a group call it and be like, this is what I got so far.
yeah. And like the low-hanging fruit piece of it, like, because I mean, I think I went in with my biggest issue. I don't drink as often, like I don't have alcohol in the house, but my
Yes.
go-to is candy.
Yeah.
I like swapped one, addiction for another.
Right.
And so it was like sugar every night, which then interrupted my sleep. And then it's not real energy. It's just like this like false.
Right.
And I remember doing like the fruit module and learning about like chocolate covered strawberries and just like the mind. Because I think also when you're in a like an emotionally dysregulated, whether you're like over or understimulated or shut down or whatever, you get sort of tunnel visioned on like what.
You think is the gonna fix it?
Yes. And I think just like even this like low hanging like expansion, just like this much more, you're like, hey, ever thought of like, I don't know, like a frozen fruit that also has some chocolate in it? Like you don't have to get rid of the candy.
Yeah,
Like
just like add it into the equation.
it like I can't I know it seems so small and simple, but like it was so like, huh.
Well, and this comes back to this compassionate problem solving, but also when we're talking about emotional eating and Ellie, what we're talking about is identifying unmet needs. A lot of times people will say, I'm an emotional eater and like food serves this purpose. And it's food is the answer. And I'm like, okay, but what's the question? Like, and like that's where people are stuck. So they're like, no, I know that this specific type of food or this ritual that I have with getting really high and eating this thing, like do they make me feel better or whatever they fulfill this need. But when I ask them to identify the need, like that's where we just have very little awareness. And if we don't know what the need is, then actually is that one solution that you have been using actually the only thing that will help you, or is there potentially a bunch of other tools in your toolkit that you could explore if you took the time to step back and actually identify what your need in this moment is? Because your need isn't candy, your need is something else, and candy is potentially something that is in the toolkit, like no shame,
Yeah.
not at all. But it's not likely that the candy is the only thing on the entire planet that could potentially serve you in that moment.
And when I think about it, and even just kind of processing it now, right? Like my need was like energy because I was so burnt out, and so like every amount of energy was focused on like surviving a cross country move. And so any in between sessions that I was doing at night, I would just like handful of, Twizzlers, handful
I
like
remember I remember too when you were like, I was thinking about it like hours ahead of time too. Like it's
literally.
like I'm gonna have that later. Like it was like a fantasizing about it happening, which I think was a very huge indication that like, okay, wait, if you're thinking about it hours ahead, like what are you like needing? Like how are you able to like crave it hours in advance? Outside the fact that we realized maybe pushing off the craving also did help, right? Like not honoring it when you're
Or
noticing it.
like it was yeah, like riding the wave of the urge and also like allowing myself to sprinkle it in so it didn't become such like this big um
Yeah, like now or never.
right, yeah, like kind of shifting a lot of the thoughts that I was getting stuck in because yeah, it was energy but also just like probably like rest or pleasure that I just wasn't accessing and capable of accessing at that time. And I
Totally.
think doing the program too, just again, I think why the fruit with the chocolate was so like I'm gonna
It was literally you guys. If you're listening to this, I have heard Courtney talk about the fruit with chocolate like at least 5 times. Like she's like, I don't know if you guys get it. Like this really like changed my life.
change my life. I like have some in my freezer. I think because what it was is it was like, hey, you can start eating real meals again. You are safe. Like it was this indicator that like you are here, you're alive, you're settled. Like, let's start adding in other substance that like
Yeah.
is showing your nervous system and your like digestive system that you're like alive and okay. And then like it all just sort of started to be like, oh right, like I can eat meals. Like I'm
Right.
alive, I'm safe, things are okay. And like everything's
Yep.
like turn online and like the candy became like I have like a whole thing of nerd clusters in there that I'm like,
Period.
I don't even want any right now because like I
Yeah.
just I'm craving it. But like it's
Yeah.
like great that I can have it in there and not binge it. And like
Yeah. The fact that it didn't require you to eliminate access to the foods. It had because it didn't have to do with having access to them. There was so much more at play. I also think the concept of compartmentalizing is really what helps a lot in LE too, right? This kind of idea of phases. So, for anyone that's not familiar, in LE, we do not go from like you struggling with making food decisions to like you making well balanced meals. Like it is a very gradual process and there's phases to it. And so the first kind of phase that we get into is just like eating consistently and making food decisions and making food decisions that actually align with like your needs for accessibility. So like in the beginning of your move, you being like, I got very little spoons. Let me figure out how to just like put food in my body in some level of a routine in a way that is accessible to me and doesn't require too many spoons or burn me out so that it's really sustainable. And then like you were able to work that muscle of making food decisions and extending compassion and like prioritizing accessibility. And then from there, you were able to like you were able to what I'm saying is you're able to compartmentalize this idea that like you needed to be eating fruits and vegetables. Like we were able to be like, not right now.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a problem for a later day, like a later date. I don't have the bandwidth for that. And then eventually you did. And then we were able to explore all the different ways to add in nutrition, still with that accessibility aspect in mind.
Yes. Like full circling it to somatic experiencing and like that
Please.
meeting the nervous system where it's at.
Yes.
Like that's what we did. My nervous system was really heightened. And so I didn't have the space to like take it on anymore. And instead of yeah, forcing me to be at a place and like shaming me into like, oh, you need to be eating whole foods. It's
Meal
like,
plan.
no, I
Yeah.
just literally need to eat this can of green beans and over nothing. And like that's like that and that but like we said, right, that's I met myself where I was and then that slowly because I started eating more actual foods, like my energy was a little bit more consistent. I had a little bit more spoons and then like
And then also, I think your capacity just increases
yeah.
the more that you, or not just capacity increases, but you are able also like doing it in that manner where you are meeting yourself where you're at and like making gradual change also leaves space for you to identify what your preferences are. Right, when
Yeah.
there's no like outside expectations on your food choices, and my recommendations are like, what is literally as accessible as possible, and what do you like?
Yeah.
What will you be most inclined to eat? Your, your preferences come first and they're centered. So as you build out nutrition in the tail end of that, like you end with an eating pattern that feels like very much in alignment with you and your actual preferences, which I feel like is similar to that concept of somatics we were talking about, right? Of like, okay, once you get to a place of safety, then you can be like, wait, who, where am I? Who am I? What is, wait, what is going on? Where is my identity? What are my actual preferences and tendencies? So I feel like that's another parallel is that concept of centering your own preferences and creating an eating pattern that's like completely new, unique to you.
Yeah. I have, through this experience, I have really been able to track where I'm at with my nervous system based off of my breakfast and how that's going to go for the rest of the day.
I
Like,
believe that 100%. I
I,
relate to that.
yeah, like I know if I eat a frozen waffle and two frozen Morningstar patties, I am overworked, overloaded, and I have no spoons.
That's me with a protein shake and a banana.
Yeah. If I'm eating scrambled eggs with like potatoes and sliced onions and peppers, and I have like an apple slice on the side with some peanut butter, I'm like in the best place in my life.
Right, your
Like,
nervous system is thriving. And for anyone listening, that parallel isn't even to moralize either of those or say one is better than the other. It's like
no.
the fact that those are two potential and viable breakfast options that
Yeah.
fulfill your needs depending on your bandwidth. That's the magic of like intuitive eating and specifically like Ellie and centering your neurodivergence is like being able to have a plan for whatever space you're in. Like you're getting fed, that's not the question. What you're getting fed is going to change a little bit depending on your bandwidth.
I think that that's my compassionate approach is I now have frozen waffles and frozen patties in there because if I ever wake up one day and I'm like, I overdid it, I did too much, instead of shaming myself for that and being like, I don't care, you have to stick to this meal plan that you
Right.
did, or I'm like, all right, girl, well, we got those frozen waffles in the freezer for a reason.
Right. What feels safe?
Yeah, like take the
What feels
bait.
safe?
Yeah.
Literally, and those are safe. There's a reason we call them safe foods. Like that's what they're for. Like that's my protein shake and my banana is a safe food. For that same reason, it's like okay, that's what feels safe. If I wake up and I'm thinking, oh, should I have this bowl of this, and this, and my knee-jerk reaction to that is like, ugh, no. Then I know that's not the option for me. I feel like safety is a huge part of this, an overarching theme of this conversation today.
Yeah.
Shocker. I mean, not surprised. I feel like that's a topic that needs to be discussed more with neurodivergence. Appreciate you sharing your experience in Ellie. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
Well, I think the other thing I'll say is the group environment.
Period. I
Uh,
agree. Right.
but I think anytime that I could access the group videos or just kind of get into the chat and like check in, it's like so validating and relieving and inspiring to like witness people going through the same thing that you are and also like giving ideas on how they're
Right.
navigating or sharing things that like yeah, sometimes I'd be like, oh my God, I can't say that. And then someone would say it and I'd be like, oh,
Oh my God, I literally said that. No, and that goes right hand in hand with this idea of like the sharing of lived experiences and me not being an authority figure. Like again, yeah, I know a lot about nutrition, but I consistently get feedback that like the group and the community that I facilitate in LA has huge impacts on especially specifically like the releasing of shame and the crowds like the validation of your struggles because a lot of times I think people are afraid to ask questions or admit that this is something they're struggling with, so being in an environment where everyone's like no girl me too, I didn't get out of bed for 3 I didn't brush my teeth yesterday. Like being able to be in an environment where conversations like that are happening really does help to chip away at the shame and make you feel less alone. And also the crowdsourcing in that same regard. Like I only have so much lived experience to share, and I think there's so much benefit of having other neurodivergent folks who've struggled, who are in different phases of their journeys in LE, being able to kind of share what helped supported them or didn't support them, and just feeling more like a yeah like a crowdsourcing forum and space community, I guess is the right word, instead of just like a dietitian being like okay do this, try
yeah,
this, good luck.
yeah, which would never work for our like, we don't want to be told what to
We
do.
don't want to, yeah, that's part of the authority aspect too, and
Yeah,
why I'm like trying so hard to chip away at that is because I understand the concept of demand avoidance.
thank you. I couldn't think of it.
Yeah, demand avoidance. The last thing I want to do is be giving out demands because I know how that is historically going to be received by my clients. So the last thing I want to do is to be telling people what to do. It's definitely more of like me kind of like laying out all these options and then being like, what do you think? Choose one, pick one up, see how you like it, put it down, come back for more, like, and we'll kind of figure it out, trial and error. But trial and error is very, very uncomfortable and difficult to navigate, I think, specifically on your own, like
Yeah,
an uncontained environment to try to like facilitate trial and error with behavior change in a way that's like meaningful and sustainable can be really tricky without some level of like structure involved.
100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's why I think that this program is like chef's kiss because it's very like trauma content, right? Where when I say mean by that is that there's a lot of autonomy and choice making.
Yes.
And that community where like you said, right, it's like at the end of the day this is really all about what I want and what I need, and
Right.
it's like this really great container of structure and compassion and just being like, you want to think about this thing, and I'd be like, oh, I never thought of that, cool, yeah, I actually do really like that.
Or being like, I tried that thing, it didn't work. Moving.
Yeah,
Period. Yeah.
yeah, great, all right, let's pivot.
Yeah. Okay. Next thing. We'll try something else. No, totally. Well, I am glad that you that it's therapist approved. Like I said, you're definitely not the only therapist in LA. I think there's several in the last few months, and I've gotten that feedback of it feeling like trauma informed, which means a lot to me. That's definitely like my primary goal. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing a little bit about your experience, not just in Ellie, but like your professional experience, because I definitely feel like I have a way better understanding of somatics as a concept and as a therapy practice now, and feel like a little bit more equipped to have those conversations or to make those recommendations to my clients. So, period. Thank you. Where can people find you, Courtney?
On Instagram, it's Renaissance Healing underscore. And then my website is renaissancehealingpllc.com.
Period. Period. Professional limited liability company.
I
I
felt
also
so professional when I made it.
I will put your all of your info in the description. I'll and for anyone who's listening, Intuition Dietitian on Instagram. And thank you guys for watching. Please drop any comments, questions about what we talked about today in the comments, and I will be sure to relay any relevant ones to Courtney, so we can continue this conversation, give you guys any more recommendations that are relevant. And yeah, thank you so much. Any last words
Thank you.
before
Yeah,
we
just thank you
cut?
to anybody who's listening and,
Yay!
join Ellie or try some somatic experiencing and
Period. And if you're in Arizona,
Virginia, yeah, in Arizona.
if you're in Arizona or Virginia, hit Courtney up for some therapy.
I got you.
Yay!